Ronan O'Gara going to join us in just a couple of moments' time on OTB AM here. But first, let's take a listen back to Brian O'Driscoll on the show yesterday morning. Here he is on the issue of pre-match nerves. Brian discussing his motivation in trying to loosen Ronan O'Gara up on the team bus.
We did a great piece with Peter O'Mahony last year in the build-up to the World Cup. Himself and Alan Quinlan were talking with Adrian Barry, and he talked about being paralysed almost by the pressure of the Six Nations games. That, you know, the night before in the Shelbourne, you're there, and the stress was so high. And, you know, you put that together with the World Cup review where News 4 talked about the psychology being wrong, and maybe we built up the pressure too much, which he had a hand in by saying that anything less than a semi-final was failure, by the way. And I just wonder about that pressure. Is that inevitable? These games are so big. There is so much riding on it. It's going to be intense pressure, the biggest pressure of your life.
Yeah, it is. I think it is. You know, I'm sure there are other situations, obviously, that are more life and death.
In real life,
you know,
yes.
In real life.
Yeah.
But you know, from a career perspective, it's a different sort of pressure that we're on, and it's, you know, people would argue that it's no bigger or smaller than their situations of, you know, trying to hold down a job where you're on the breadline, where
100%.
you've got bills to pay. So, you know, it's relative to you as an individual, and maybe the pressures that you feel because you're in the public domain, because, you know, on a Saturday you're going to be judged by your performances by people watching at home, then you're going to be judged in the paper on the Sunday by journalists, and then on Monday you're going to be judged a third time by your coaches and your peers as to what your performance was like. So that's a lot of scrutiny to deal with. And that's why some people, it's not for them. Some people come and go, and dips in form aren't just solely about the physical aspect, it's about the mental of not being able to deal with that as well. And that's why the mentally tough athletes, irrespective of their ability, physical ability, tend to go the course longer than anyone else, because they're able to stay in the fight, and because they're able to convince themselves that that's the environment that they belong in.
He clearly is one of those guys who can do that, because obviously, you know, the Lions captain has come back from the setback of being dropped from the team. But I do wonder, like, how do you get loose? How does the team get loose ahead of this game? Like, how does he use that the night before, and how does everybody else make sure that there's no kind of contagion from him, or if there is, it's a positive thing?
I think everyone's feeling their own pressures as well. It might not, you know, that's an individual thing to him. I'm sure some guys are very relaxed, or some guys on the facade look very relaxed, but inside they're crying. So it's you don't fully know about how different individuals are, and you know, you could see it. I used to always love, and I've talked before about the bus journey to internationals, where at the start, you know, a couple of people were wearing headphones. By the end, nearly everyone was. And that was particularly, I used to just have a chat with Raj, because he was someone that never listened to music, but he'd be very focused, and you could see the nervousness on his face going, and I was just trying to have a laugh, because that was about expending my own nervous energy, and he'd be telling me to piss off and stop annoying him. But you know, as much as I thought it would break his nervousness a bit, but also selfishly, it was about me trying to put myself at ease. And then, you know, when Raj went, I had to, you know, stop Rob Kearney from wearing earphones, because I needed someone to talk to. I was like, I can't be the only quiet guy on the bus here. You know, there's plenty of time for seriousness when we get to the ground.
Ronan O'Gara, good morning to you.
Hi, how are you guys?
We have to give you a right to reply there.
No, great memories. I actually can remember it like yesterday. Leaving the captain's meeting, either walking down the... it was originally the Berkeley Court, then it became the Shelbourne we moved to, and... at that stage, we had all our seats. I was second from the back seat were the normal heads, and Brian was behind me, and it was absolute torture. I just absolutely hated him, because he was just, well, it's interesting to hear his aspect on it. You know, as you say, players are so selfish, and they need to be, because they have to get their preparation right, and all that matters is them. But now that you're kind of in the coaching world, you see it from a collective point of view. But yeah, Brian was just, you know, how he actually was able to burst out laughing, where I was kind of like, no, I've got to be serious. But he's probably more the New Zealand model, where, you know, 4 minutes or 4 hours before a final or a semi-final, there's boys whipping down tracksuit pants and sticking their foot in and messing, and different rules for different folks, different strokes, as they say, different strokes for different folks, and everyone prepares differently, but all it really matters is how you perform on the pitch. But we were probably brought up on the be serious, and you have to be serious for days, but I don't necessarily think that's the right approach.
Well, why do you think you had that difference, Ronan? Was it in terms of the culture that Brian was brought up in as opposed to yours, or was it just natural personalities?
No, I suppose it was a major weakness of mine in the fact that I struggled with the kind of, in terms of the individual sport outlook I had in terms of the kicking. I could completely understand why people would be like that, because they had a game that they could kind of enjoy. But I beat myself up over the fact that I put the responsibility, and I like that too. I don't want this to be a negative. I kind of warped my mind into thinking that the 14 others that played, they don't really have a direct influence on the game in that regard. But for me, I have to be getting kind of between 10 to 20 points every game. It's my responsibility. I remember Neil Jenkins told me a great quote, about in Wales when, people don't thank the postman. So they don't thank Neil Jenkins, because Neil Jenkins is expected to kick the ball over the bar, same as the postman when they get letters. And it changed my mindset in goal kicking. He used to talk to himself in a third-term person about Neilo. When Neilo does the business, no one thanks him, but Nilo's expected to kick the ball over the bar, and that's what his job was, and that's exactly what my job was. But I think in the mentality of where we were, and there was a lot of David and Goliath stories when we were first coming on the scene, and how lucky we are to be playing for Ireland or playing for Munster, but that isn't necessarily the case. Why wouldn't we be playing and winning for Munster? Times have changed, thankfully, and the mindsets have changed, and the visions have changed. So, no, I was, I suppose that Lions tour, it was kind of like the perception has changed for everyone playing professional rugby in Ireland. And the reality is, if you wanted to be looked upon as one of the best, you have to be hitting really high percentages as a kicker. But that tormented me. But I wouldn't change it. I loved it, and I needed that. But at the start, it was, wow, as those journeys, you compare that to the 30 minutes you get your teammates after a victory, compared to the emotions going to a game. It was horrendous.
Yeah, you're watching OTB AM, the sports breakfast show from Off the Ball, live every weekday morning from 7:30. We're in conversation with Ronan O'Gara ahead of a big weekend of Six Nations rugby. Obviously, all of this conversation kicked off from a chat we had with Peter O'Mahony last year about his levels of nervousness. Ronan, I wondered he had spoken about being in the hotel beforehand and how the nerves and the stress would overtake him to a degree. The practical manifestation of that, Brian talks there about the nervousness being obvious in your face. What was the levels of it, or when would it kick in, or can you talk to us a little bit about how all of that would unfold on match day?
On match day, well, it's well before match day. Match day, there's a glimmer of hope, because you know that you're only 8 hours away from kickoff, and all you got to do is it starts with an early rise, obviously. You can't really sleep with excitement. And then the first challenge is trying to get a breakfast into you. But big days, it gets into you, but you're usually running for a number 2. Sorry, people are
good. Listen,
trying to enjoy their breakfast. I feel like it's nearly lunchtime over here. But it was, I think you look at, I suppose, it's very different now, and so much isn't that different, but it was, I think the great thing about that was the stories, because you've, John Hayes, you've Claude, you've Golov, you've people like that essentially, they gave you your grounding because they were the people that came before you. So some great characters in the Munster pack and in the Irish pack starting off, but it all evolves, and it's continuously evolving. And you look upon now the roles of sports psychologists and mentors and mental skills coaches in the game. And I think our players nowadays are very well prepared, but it's very hard, I think, when something means so much to you, to put a value on that. And I think that's the anomaly of sport nowadays, is that your inner self-worth or your inner self-drive is very, very difficult to sum up to people, even in your family, because they sometimes don't understand what this means to you. Because it's I get it, it's a professional sport, but there's certain things that don't change, Adrian. That playing for your country is a massive deal. And you look at the boys this weekend, and they're in camp now, and it's Friday before Sunday, Ireland and England, and yes, the game's professional, but it's still a hell of an occasion, and something that you should be getting knots in your stomach about. If you do not have a knot in your stomach on Sunday morning, there's something wrong with you. I get you that you're really well prepared, but I think the feeling of knowing that you have a few million people behind you willing you to victory should weigh heavily on your shoulders.
This occasion specifically, the trip to Twickenham, your own record, do you know what it is? V England at Twickenham.
Idea. No idea.
6 games. What was
we won half of them, did we?
Yeah, half and half.
Yeah.
What was it like?
Exactly. But like that's, I think it's the same as everything in sport and everything in rugby. Like, once you do something once, you should be doing it more often. But you look at kind of where we were coming from, I would say the record before that was pretty grim. But sport, so much of it is convincing yourself beforehand that you're going to do it. Now there's a track there. It was the same as when Munster won European Cups. Other teams knew that in Ireland, especially Leinster, well, if they can do it, we should really be doing it. So I think, yes, belief is huge, but also, in Twickenham, as a rugby player, once you kind of arrive there and you run out, if you don't get excited about playing in Twickenham, there's a screw loose in your head. It's a fantastic ground. It's an all kind of, it's very different to Millennium. There's kind of, you get a great feel of kind of old traditional values when you play in Twickenham in a massive, vast stadium, while the Millennium Stadium is on you. It's high and it's close and it's kind of a condensation feeling, while with England you get massive feeling of kind of grandeur and vastness, and a great old traditional stadium with the chants of swing low bellowing from the crowd. But that motivates you in a great way, because the Ireland supporters will be heard, but England will be at least 3 or 4 times as many of them, so they'll have the great support. But that was always, I think, a massive carrot of teams I played in too. I think we always kind of said, we're at Thomond Park. This result will take care of itself. But I think it was when you played in away venues that really was a measure of where you were, probably as a man firstly, but secondly as a rugby player.
But what can Ireland do this weekend, Ronan, to shut that crowd up fairly early in the game?
Well, it's a bit of a silly answer, but I think controlling the ball and controlling the tempo will be key this weekend. You look at what happened in the Aviva in the game. Obviously, that probably tilted a lot of the balance, or they sapped an awful lot of the confidence. Was a kind of England kicked long, Conor Murray kicked out, and England had a plan to an overthrow, and within 2 phases was it Johnny May scoring in the left-hand corner. And ever since then, they owned that game and they owned the Six Nations. So I think, even though it's only 2 games and we're at probably an interesting stage in the fact we've won 2 home games, but this will be a big step up for anyone thinking it isn't. I'd say they're misplaced. England at home, I think their first time there since the World Cup final. It'll be a real test, and it'll be a test for 80 minutes, because England will test Ireland in areas that Wales and Scotland weren't capable of testing them, especially in collisions. And you can say, the 2 Vina opponents aren't playing, but they have, I think, a series of threats throughout the park, and that's what England do well. They are able to play within their game, but they're also able to have a very effective kicking game, but they're also able to carry hard. And I wouldn't appreciate what carrying hard looks like at Twickenham.
Yeah, it's hard. Like, one of the difficulties with analysing the game is it's hard to know what true England team actually we have on the basis of what we've seen so far. It's hard to know exactly where they're at.
Well, their selection is interesting, yeah, and obviously we don't have that at the minute, but I think if they go Farrell, Tuilagi, Slade, that's a dangerous midfield. I think that's their best midfield. I'm a fan of Ford, but I think Ford is brilliant when he has big ball carriers ahead of him and he gets the front foot. But also he looks probably better maybe than he should have against a New Zealand defence that was porous, surprisingly porous, but also very ineffective in attack in a semi-final.
Can I ask you just on that one, Ronan, and we are short of the team selection, but the forward point, not being a fan, are they best served with that selection? Are they best served effectively with Farrell not at out half and having both on the pitch?
No, I think there's merit in both, I think, Adrian. I think you would go, for me, if you have Henshaw and Aki in the centre, Aki Bundy, there's Bundy Aki, sorry, in the centre this week. You know, I think that's a power combination. So you could easily go whoever England. What I'm trying to say, sorry, is the ringrose factor in terms of potential beating on an outside break. So I would say Ireland will be direct with Henshaw and Bundy Aki for the first 50 minutes. But you look what England did for the semi-final or the quarter-final against Australia. They didn't start forward, and it was a big move, or it was a good move, because you have you know, the three really power runners from Australia that play in their midfield. So no, I think for me, you know, not that I'm, but what Eddie Jones potentially could do, he could go 50 minutes of Farrell, Tuilagi and Slade, and then for the last 30, when teams are a little bit more tired, you bring in the kind of first and second receivers, a double ball player, and you go forward Farrell.
Yeah. All right, well, look, we'll see how that pans out over the next while. Ronan, we didn't want to let you go, and I know you've written about it in the Irish Examiner this morning. A very sad week for Munster Rugby, for the club and for everybody around it as well, with the passing of Garrett Fitzgerald. Mr. Munster, by all accounts.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. A great man, and sometimes we're all very keen to praise people when they pass away, but it would be very accurate in this regard. I think, Garrett Fitzgerald was a man who, I suppose, brought Munster from really humble beginnings to a world-class brand. And it's hard, I suppose, because people ask me what your thoughts on it, and you know, I think when you're in that kind of bubble of professional sport, he was always there, and every journey we went on, every big occasion, Garrett was there. But I never looked upon him as a guy that had a big title. He was very, very unassuming, a very decent man, and a great family man. And it's just very, very sad. We knew he was unwell a year or two ago, probably 2 years ago, and the prognosis wasn't good. But you don't, you try and keep hope. And, you know, all my memories of Munster Rugby, of the great days, Garrett was there. It's just a really sad day for Anya and his family. And essentially, may he rest in peace.
Yeah, we'd echo those comments, Ronan. You've been very good with your time. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for the talk.
Ronan O'Gara there on the line from La Rochelle, obviously.